All logs, including our custom application logs, are now also stored via App Insights in our Log Analytics workspace. Anything that is in such a workspace can be queried with KQL or Custo query language. I'm looking at my Application Insights resource over on Azure. Let's open the logs blade here. Now let's make this a bit bigger. I mentioned previously that data in a Log Analytics workspace is stored in tables. That's what you can see on the left here underneath Application Insights. These are views or tables related to Application Insights stored in the linked Log Analytics workspace. In case you have other services connected to that same Log Analytics workspace, you will see those showing up here as well. There's quite a few views that have automatically been added because we enabled App Insights. Metrics, dependencies, exceptions, performance counters, full requests and more can all be queried. Now, there's often a little bit of confusion that exists between Application Insights, Log Analytics and the Log Analytics workspace. How I like to view it is to consider the Log Analytics workspace as a location, the underlying tables actually, where the logs effectively end up in. Log Analytics then is just a feature of a Log Analytics workspace. It's the feature that allows you to query the logs. Application Insights then also lays on top of a Log Analytics workspace, and it offers more useful views over the logged data, typically data related to applications. Log Analytics then is also a feature of Application Insights. It's the feature that allows you to query those Application Insights views. It is, by the way, possible to write code that directly logs to a Log Analytics workspace from your application. And that is how it used to be done in the past, before Application Insights became popular and commonly used. I would say that today, though, the way to go is through Application Insights because of the much richer experience it offers. Anyway, time for some queries. Let's start with querying the requests. For that, simply writing requests in the query window here and running it should be sufficient. And indeed, we see a bunch of requests show up here that match the requests we sent to our API. Clicking one open gives access to all the fields related to that request. As you can see, there's quite a lot of data that's automatically logged here. With a where clause, we can filter. For example, say that we only want those requests for which the URI is the destinations endpoint. We add a vertical bar syndrome and then add where, followed by the actual clause. We want to check if the URL matches our endpoint. So that's the endpoint to the destinations. And let's give this another try. There we go. Only the few requests to the destinations now show up of the last 24 hours, because that's what we have automatically selected on top here. If you want to change this, you can easily do this via this filter. By adding fields, we can now also only select certain fields. Say that we only want to return the URL and the duration. We can use the project keyword for that, followed by the fields we want to see, so URL and duration. Let's give this another try. And there we go. All we get back now is the URL and the duration. By clicking chart here, I can actually view this as a chart as well. Now, Custo query language isn't difficult, but for most of us it's new. I, for example, don't know from the top of my head how to write complicated queries like this. I'm also not going to go through each and every query option here, but I can give you a few tips. A good one is to look at other queries for inspiration. By default, quite a lot of queries are added here that you can add to the editor. So I simply double click it and the query I just selected gets added here. So from this, you can gather a lot of inspiration regarding what you exactly need. Often you will actually already find the exact query you need in the examples. The second tip is to have a look at Microsoft's documentation. There's a very large KQL quick reference available here that allows you to quickly learn how to work with all these different commands. By clicking through to one command, you get to the details of it, including some examples. So this is very helpful. Now, as you can see, there's many more tables that can be queried here, but I'm not going to go through all of these. The way to do that is likewise as what I've just shown you. So combine that with the query examples and you should be good to go. One table that is very interesting, it's one I tend to use, is the exceptions table or the traces table. Both are very useful. Running a query on that table immediately shows you the exceptions that happened or potentially traces that were enabled in your application. Alright, up next we'll inspect application health and performance data. Out of the box, Application Insights logs a large amount of data and metrics that can be used to get info on how your application is doing in much detail. The overview pane is a good starting point, so let me open that. Here you can already find a few metrics like the failed requests, the server response time, all the requests to the server, and so on. All of this is filtered to the time frame selected on top here. So that already gives you an overview of whatever is logged in Application Insights. In our current situation, that's our app service, so of our application health, but more is possible. By going to the dashboard, which we can find via the button on top here, you can see even more diagrams: reliability, responsiveness, server exceptions and dependency failures, average processor and process CPU utilization, and so on. You can click through on each of them. For example, the average available memory metric here. Let me open that one. And on it, we can then zoom in by selecting a time range, zoom in even more, zoom out again. Everything you'd expect from an interactive graph. The dashboard itself is quite interactive as well. You can move the items around. You can make them larger, make them smaller. You can add filter settings and time settings and so on. And you can even create a new dashboard altogether via the Create button on top here. So there's definitely a lot of data that can be viewed here. Let me open the failed request one. Because what is quite interesting here is, especially when you're trying to diagnose why something is going on, is that you can get a view of where exactly the request has failed. If I, for example, filter on the 500 exception code here, I can select every single request that has been sent. And for all of those requests, I can get a dependency view, including every request down the line to whatever I have a dependency on. In this case, I'm getting the itineraries, which has a dependency on my SQL Server database, and it is at that level that we see that an exception has happened. This exception is actually coming from me preparing a few demos having to do with managed identity. So this end-to-end transaction view is one of the ones you'd often use to try and figure out what's going on. In this case, it's just an app service connected to a SQL Server database. But in Azure, often more components are used. In the deep dive version of this course, which follows up on this getting started version, you will see that to, for example, create a full workflow when a request is sent, you would go via a logic app to a function app, then potentially to a database or to Azure Storage and so on. By enabling Application Insights, you can actually get a view of the full end-to-end transaction to figure out what exactly is happening. So this is a very good way to figure out what's going on. But what if you want to monitor your application with live metrics? Well, that's possible as well. Let's look at that next.